Dr. Ford, can you hear me? Do you have us on mute? No. Oh, Dr. Ford? Dr. Ford? Oh, there's Leslie. All right, I'm just trying to see if you guys can hear us. And do we have Commissioner Kipper there yet? I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Ms. Campbell, hear us?
Now we hear you. Thank you.
No problem. We're getting everything settled down, and we'll be ready to go here very shortly.
Okay, give me a high sign, please.
Damon, did you say if Scott was down there with you or not?
Hi, this is Marie. I'm just coming on the phone.
Thank you, Marie. We're just about ready to get started. And I think we're...
Damon, is Commissioner Kipper down there?
There
Oh, there he is. Okay.
Okay. I think we are ready to get started. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the April 10th, 1:30 p.m. Scheduled meeting for the Silver State Health Insurance Exchange, and we are video conferencing between here in Carson City and also in the office in Henderson. I want to welcome everyone. I do have a couple of announcements before we take a roll call vote to make sure we have a quorum. We have pulled and rescheduled a couple of the agenda items. Item number 6, which deals with the responsibilities of the interim executive director. Mr. Fisher had to be out of town today, and we felt it was very important to have his interaction in that discussion item, so that will be delayed until the next meeting. And also item number 9, which is the report from Bob Carr on the results of the BOSS audit. That was posted about 2 hours ago. It's a 60-page report. I had staff poll a couple of the board members, and they have not had sufficient time to review that. So we will schedule a special meeting to review that. So we're also polling the board members to see their availability, possibly for next Thursday. And that will be the only agenda item on that meeting. So with that, I would like to have Mr. Roos take roll call and make sure we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. For the record, Shauna DeRoos. Ms. Johnstone.
Here in Carson City. Old habit. Here in Las Vegas.
Thank you. Ms. Lewis.
Here in Las Vegas.
Dr. Jameson. Ms. Kerr.
Here on the phone.
Dr. Ford.
Here in Las Vegas.
Director Wilden. Commissioner Kipper.
Here in Las Vegas.
And Director Teska. Here. And Ms. Atkins.
Here on the phone.
And Chair Campbell.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Let's open it up for public comment. May I have a show of hands both in Henderson and here in Carson to see who wants to participate in public comment? Any here in Carson? I don't see any here. How about in Henderson?
We have 2, Madam Chair.
Yes, would you have them come forward then and have them identify themselves for the record? And then, Ms. Johnstone, will you help me direct the meetings from there in Henderson, please?
Certainly.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Barry Gold. I'm the Director of Government Relations for AARP Nevada. Now that we find the first open enrollment period has ended and we're into the special enrollment period, AARP Nevada has worked with Nevada HealthLink, the brokers, the agents, a lot of the community stakeholders, and doing a lot of community outreach and talking to Nevada citizens about the benefits of the Affordable Care Act and what's in it for them and where to go for help. And what we found all across the state and all the community partners that we worked with found is people wanted health insurance. They wanted health insurance and they wanted to know how they could sign up. They saw the value in it. So while the implementation may have been bumpy or rocky or muddy or gravelly or washed out at times, they persevered and they wanted to get health insurance. So Mike Wilden was in a presentation to the Health Committee yesterday, the Legislative Health Committee. I'll echo something that he said. The most important thing that we need to consider at this point is there's approximately, or there will soon be, 150,000 Nevadans, our fellow citizens, who will have the peace of mind that they have health insurance. So regardless whether they get pink eye or they have a heart attack or whatever happens, they will have the health coverage to know that they can get the care they need. That's what this was about, was getting people health care. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gold.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Bobette Bond, and I'm here today with the Nevada Health Co-op. And we have two issues we just want to make sure the board's well aware of as you move forward today. The first is regarding the discussions that you've had about the payment portal and having the carriers take over responsibility for all incoming payments. We heard, because when we're not here, we can't testify on the phone, so I wanted to come down, because when we're on the phone and hearing things, we don't really have a chance to interact. We heard on the last meeting that there was some discussion whether the co-op would be able to meet the requirements of moving payment over to the carriers. And while we understand some carriers are set for that, maybe all the carriers are set for that, except us, we do have strong concerns about the timing of that, the cost of that, how we would manage that. We really built the co-op around the requirements that the state exchange put out. So we formed around the exchange, and having that function provided by the exchange meant that we created our entire infrastructure without it. And so it's going to be cost and time for us. And we don't want to be put in an anti-competitive environment where 3 carriers on the exchange are ready and we're not. And we just want to make sure you take that into consideration in your decisions. And I think we heard in the meeting last time somebody say that we could rely or we could go to or we should seek the help of other co-ops. And while we certainly are going to, that wasn't discussed with us prior to the testimony about it. While we're certainly going to do that, we're going to go see what the other co-ops are doing. We don't rely on the other co-ops for infrastructure development, so we can't just piggyback and have a separate state structure that's completely separate co-op. We're not integrated. The co-ops all operate completely independently based on their state requirements. We don't really have a way for the co-op to go have a different co-op either process payment or design payment for us. So I really felt like we need to clarify that. Quickly, the second issue is regarding the outstanding members that haven't been able to enroll, that have attempted to. And we would just like to, with all haste, make sure that the exchange is creating guidance from Xerox about that. I think there's been work in that department, that area, but we have dozens of people with HIX numbers and hundreds of people without HIX numbers that came into our retail office the last week of enrollment to try to get enrolled. And the link was failing and they couldn't make it even though they were there to make it. And we just want to make sure that those rules are created, that guidance is created quickly so that we can continue to enroll. We are doing that. We just want to make sure there's no hiccups in there. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else there in Henderson?
No, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. Before we go on to the business of the board today, I do want to take a moment to welcome one of our new board members, Julia Teska. And Julie comes to us as an ex officio member as the Director of Administration for the state of Nevada. So Julia, welcome, and we really appreciate your being here and welcome your comments and input as we go forward.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to the approval of the minutes for March 20th. Do we have any edits or changes to those minutes? If there are none, may I have a motion to approve?
Barbara, this is Marie Kerr.
Yes.
Just one small change to the minutes. In the portion which discusses the reason that we put forward the special enrollment period, before the, I think that it should be clear that it was done because of the continued error from Xerox, not that the last date of errors was on the last date of enrollment, or because that was the last date of open enrollment. It was because there was continued errors through the last date of open enrollment, and I think that should be clear in the minutes. I don't think it is.
Okay.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Lynn Atkins. I agree with that. There was definitely a lot of discussion, and I think the motion about a continuing triggering event, but we had to set the date as March 31st as the last date of open enrollment.
All right, so could one of you give me the language that you would like to have changed? I think it's under item number 4, and I think you're talking about the motion, aren't you? Ms. Kerr or Ms. Atkins, do you have language that you want inserted in there? I think it's the second line of the motion that you want to have changed.
Lynn, do you want to take a stab at it? I don't have the minutes in front of me, and my connection's cutting out a little bit. But I think that Lynn has a good idea of the language that should be in. Can you do that, Lynn?
Sure. Yes, I think we know from past ones I'm very good with some of these last-minute clarifications, but I think it should just say that that because of a continuing failure of the technology, and the last day of open enrollment was March 31st, that March 31st was the final triggering date. I can draft something, or we can do that offline, or if we can put this off until a little bit later so we can get something together that's a little bit more clear. But I think the language just needs to say that there was a continuing triggering event and that open enrollment was ended March 31st. I think that's the difference. So maybe we just put that there was a continuing trigger event.
Okay. Why don't we do this? Why don't you work on some language on that, and we'll bring back these minutes at the next meeting so we're not having to rush through it, and then the two of you can have a comfort level that it's correctly stated. Is that all right with both of you?
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to the minutes for March 27th. Are there any changes or edits to those minutes?
Madam Chair, this is Lynn Atkins. I think at the very end of the meeting in public comment, I read there was a letter sent by Senator Harry Reid that I both read into the record and handed to staff down in Henderson. So I want to make sure both that gets in the minutes and that the letter has been posted.
All right. That's a simple correction. We can have that added. Is there a second to that amendment?
Marie Kerr, second.
All right. Let's move on the amendment, and then we'll move back to the full minutes again. All those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right. Thank you. The motion passes. And then with respect to the entirety of the minutes, are there any other amendments to those? If not, is there a motion to approve, please?
Lynn Atkins, so moved.
LaBonne Lewis, I second.
Okay. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Motion passes. And let's move on to agenda item number 4 then, which is the hearing to consider and adopt exchange fees to be charged to insurers in the 2015, and with direct to the staff on how to use all of the funding sources. So who is going to start that discussion for us? Mr. Haycock?
Yes, Madam Chair. Damon Haycock, Finance
Thank
and
you.
Research Officer for the Exchange. Today I'm going to begin, after the notice, there's a report adopting the 2015 per member per month fees, and just want to reframe what was discussed at the last board meeting and the direction that was given to staff to ensure that the fees are reflective of what the board has requested. So on page 2, again, there's the background that gives us the authority to charge fees, and that we will use the same methodology that is approved through our regulation. Primarily that the medical per member per month fees will be developed to ensure we can pay our obligations, and that our dental per member per month fees will be based on a, for lack of better terms, a proportion of that fee, and that the combined medical and dental fees, if that type of plan is provided at the exchange, will be the sum of both of them. Just like before at the last board meeting, there's a table there on page 2 that discusses the baseline costs that the exchange needs to keep the lights on, for lack of better terms, the minimum amount of obligations that we need to meet to ensure that we adhere to the board's recommended expenses, to include the exchange enrollment facilitator program and any advertising costs. What you will see in those baseline costs is the lack of individual premium processing at the exchange. So these baseline costs, again, are omitting that feature based on the board's decision to shift that individual premium processing to the carriers as soon as possible. Staff was asked to develop 3 options for the 2015 per member per month fees based on 3 different enrollment figures. The first option, number 1, is projected enrollment of 60,000 people. There are some pros and cons to each of these options that I'll briefly go over. Utilizing a 60,000 enrollee figure requires the exchange only increase the current enrollment from approximately 25,000, and at the time of writing this report, the numbers have increased. Of course, we are closer to 29,000 today. But from this report, 25,000 to 60,000, which is an increase of about 140%. Based on the exchange's current enrollment successes and failures, this figure is the least aggressive of all options presented. On the other hand, on the con side, that the federally facilitated marketplace will charge in 2015 fees that account for 3.5% of the average premium. So if the desire is to maintain pace with the federally facilitated marketplace and not go over that figure, the average premium of the exchange would then need to have increased all the way to almost $440 next year. Currently, the average premium as of March 31st is about $377. The second option requested was for an enrollment figure of about $100,000. And that fee without dental is $11.68. And I forgot to mention the fee for the first option was $15.36. So I'll go back real quick. But in this option 2, it's $11.68. If you add dental, it's $12.41 because the standalone dental cost would be 73 cents. There are, again, pros and cons with option number 2 as well. The exchange's strategic plan was developed utilizing enrollment projections of 118,000 in 2014 and 151,000 in 2015. So utilizing a 100,000 enrollment figure is closer to the original enrollment projections and still allows for some caution. Additionally, utilizing $11.68 allows the exchange to remain sustainable by meeting the baseline costs for 2015 if enrollment stays at or around 25,000 this next year. The cons of this option Our projected increased enrollment from 25,000 to 100,000 is about 4 times the current amount. So this projected increase may become too aggressive and force the exchange to make those decisions to eliminate advertising or reductions to the EEF program when open enrollment ends on February 15th, 2015. The third option requested was projected enrollment of 150,000. The QHP cost, or the per member per month fee for that option without dental, is $9.84. With dental, it's $10.46, and that standalone dental portion is at 62 cents. The pros for this enrollment figure of 150,000 is only 1,000. It's only 1,000 enrollees short of the original 151,000 enrollments that ties directly to the exchange's strategic plan. If 150,000 individuals are truly uninsured and can't afford the exchange's marketplace plans with or without subsidies, this enrollment figure then basically forces the exchange to enroll as many Nevadans as possible because it is the most aggressive. The cons of this option are that the increase in enrollment from 25,000 to 150,000 is 6 times the current amount. This projected enrollment, again, is the most aggressive option and could lead to potential sustainability issues in 2015. Additionally, with a $9.84 per member per month fee, the baseline costs for current enrollment could not be paid. So major fixed costs, like salaries or even this Las Vegas office that I'm sitting in today, may need to be cut to meet the obligations if the enrollment doesn't crest at least the 25,000 folks. And finally, I've presented a fourth option, and that is what that would look like if the federally facilitated marketplace were to determine fees based on our 2014 average premiums. And so with a projected enrollment of around 78,000 folks next year, the QHPs without dental would be $13.21. The QHPs with dental would be $14.04, and that standalone dental plan per member per month fee would be at 83 cents. So if the board aligns the per member per month fee amounts with the equivalent federally facilitated marketplace fee amounts, the exchange will be able to allow for a lower enrollment figure than what is in the strategic plan while maintaining the exchange's goal of not being more expensive than the federally facilitated marketplace. However, the cons to this option is that the corresponding projected enrollment for 3.5% of 2014 average premium amount is a little over 3 times the current enrollment figure we have today. So if the exchange cannot meet that projected enrollment, again, there would need to be some cuts to either the exchange enrollment facilitator program and or the marketing or advertising campaign in 2015 to meet those current obligations. So it's my understanding that Commissioner Kipper has some comments that he'd like to make about this process, but I'm willing to take any questions at this time, either before or after, and staff recommends that the board select and adopt the 2015 per member per month fees that will ensure the sustainability of the exchange.
Thank you, Mr. Haycock. Let's move ahead to some of the comments from Commissioner Kipper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me make sure I get this right so everybody can hear me. First of all, I want to commend Damon and the staff for putting together a very comprehensive report. I think at this point, and also at the last meeting, the division was asked to consider a review and either confirm, affirm, or make a suggestion. And the division did a very quick and cursory review of this, and with the large number of variables that are here and the fact that the demographics continue to emerge on our enrollment here in Nevada, and also some projections that that Damon mentioned, the division would recommend at this point that we be given another couple of weeks to review this. I understand that the board has to make a decision by the end of April, but I think another couple of weeks will allow us to look at and kind of filter this information on the demographics, particularly, as well as perhaps some of the expenses would allow the board to have a better view of what the right choices might be.
Thank you, Commissioner Kipper. All right, we've got the report, and then we've got a suggestion by the commissioner from the Division of Insurance. Let's open that discussion up among board members. See if there's questions for either one of them.
Madam Chair, this is Lynn Atkins.
Yes, Ms. Atkins.
I like the idea of getting more information. I think we need to be very careful about this decision. I think what would also be helpful is getting some information about advertising costs and expenses. I think we just at the last meeting just kind of said, oh, we'll just use the same amount that we used last time. But I think having a little bit more data about maybe what's worked, what hasn't worked, how we could do things a little bit different with advertising, I think would be helpful. If we can get those costs down as well and take a look at that, I think that would be a good thing to have as well.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair, this is Leslie Johnstone. Yes, I'd be interested in hearing more about the demographic side of this equation. I don't have any basis for any enrollment estimate at this point, so I'd be willing to defer this until a later meeting in April when the commissioner can come back.
All right, and if I might, to address your question about demographics, Ms. Johnstone, after our last meeting, I had asked staff to reach out to Xerox to see if they could give us the demographics, the financial income demographics of those people that have enrolled in the QHP side. And those numbers or those reports are just starting to roll out today. And I would like staff to at least finish with Xerox on that and get that distributed to the board members, because I think it'll be very helpful for us determining where our target market really lies. So are there any other questions or comments from board members?
Madam Chair, LaVon Lewis, I just agree with the proposal to wait and get further information on this particular proposal and perhaps table this until the next meeting of the board.
Madam Chair, this is Leslie Johnstone. One more comment. I think it would also be important to have the information on the carrier billing options that I thought were going to be fully vetted out for this meeting. So I think we need that information also before we can figure out what to assume that way in the rates for 2015.
I would agree. Thank you. We probably should have had that agenda item before we had this one, but since we're deferring it, I think we need to incorporate that into anything that we're planning for 2015. Ms. Kerr or Ms. Atkins or Dr. Ford, any comments from you?
Madam Chair, for the record, Dr. Jameson is now here.
Oh, thank you.
Madam Chair, this is Lynn Atkins. I gave my comments. So if we do put this over, I would ask that we get more detailed information from KPS3 as well.
All right, thank you. And I think I hear, let's see, Mr. Belcourt, do we need a motion to defer this, or just the comments are sufficient?
Well, if you, it's really setting an agenda item for a future meeting. You could set the agenda item offline as the, it doesn't need to be done in the meeting. But, for clarity purposes, you might choose to do so.
All right, sounds like we need a motion to defer. And I believe Commissioner Kipper said he probably needed a couple of weeks on that.
Madam Chair, this is Leslie Johnstone. I would move that we defer this until we can have information on, at a minimum, marketing input from the insurance commissioner and input on the individual billing options before us.
This is Dr. Ford. I second.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, I think that's all ayes, so motion passes. All right, next item on the agenda are the staff quarterly reports, and who is going to take the lead on that? Oh, group effort. Where do we want to get started then?
Start with finance with Damon.
All right, Mr. Haycock, do you want to get us started with finance, please?
Yes, I'll go ahead. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Damon Haycock for the record. Agenda item number 5 is our staff quarterly reports provided every quarter on clockwork, basically. This will provide, of course, the information regarding our finances, our outreach, and especially on this report and moving forward, we're going to be reporting on the quality assurance processes at the exchange, and Ms. Carrie Eaton will be providing that piece of information. I'm going to start with the financial report for, of course, the quarter ending March 31st of this year. This represents the third quarter for the state fiscal year 2014. During this quarter, we did receive that 5th Level 1 Exchange Establishment Grant Award in the amount of just under $7 million, $6,998,685. That grant was requested and received to support the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services continuing efforts to implement the federal requirements to the eligibility engine, as well as additional marketing messaging and the offset of anticipated credit card fees. Additionally, the exchange was selected by the Nevada State Controller's Office to participate in a third-party single audit to meet the requirements of OMB A133 for agencies that expend over $500,000 of federal grant funding annually. And at the end of that audit, we were informed there were 0 findings. The chart that you're used to seeing every quarter on this page represents the current authority for state fiscal year 14 for all funding as of the end of March. And as you can see, it appears that we haven't been spending all of our money trending to spend 100% by the end of the fiscal year, but we do have a lot of outstanding contractual obligations that we're working through right now. But total expenditures for the year is only at 33%. Moving on, I'm going to go ahead and give the outreach for the quarter ending March 31st, as our communication officer, CJ Bowden, is not at the meeting today. Staff did conduct 9 presentations in the first calendar quarter there of 2014, reaching 527 individuals. And the requests for these staff presentations have definitely fallen off as a result of the Navigator program and outreach program by KPS3, as well as the door-to-door campaigns ramping up. So think of it as a 3-pronged approach that we're utilizing our other friends and our other agencies, as well as our contractors and our navigators, to perform a lot of these functions as what they were required to do. There's all the dates and the amount of attendees where all those presentations were provided by staff on the bottom of page 2. Continuing on page 3, the marketing outreach programs and of course the efforts of our exchange enrollment facilitators continue to be very successful, driving hundreds of thousands of unique visitors to our website, thousands of calls to the call center, and also filling up Navigator organization appointment slots with persons seeking that critical in-person assistance to enroll. As far as marketing efforts for the open enrollment period, continue to push very hard, leading up to the 11th hour on March 31st. This section of the report outlines some metrics that the team can report to date. It also outlines moving forward activities for ongoing marketing support, in addition to plans to collect even more data to further demonstrate the success of this marketing campaign. So based on the nearly 2 million unique website visitors, in addition to the tens of thousands of calls to the call center, the marketing team is confident that the message successfully reached Nevadans and about how and why they should seek income-based coverage through Nevada HealthLink. The team is also very confident that the campaign's focus on effectively reaching young invincibles helped contribute to the nearly 30% mark for the enrollments of consumers ages 34 and under. However, the measurement of success will not be based on web and call center metrics alone. KPS3 has contracted with Applied Analysis to conduct a statewide survey to gauge the awareness about Nevada HealthLink among uninsured Nevadans. A final post-campaign analysis and report is also in process and will be submitted as part of the next quarterly report. The post-campaign analysis will include evaluation of all activities for the campaign starting in April of 2013 when outreach first began, all the way through the end of open enrollment. It will include a media buy analysis and the post-campaign awareness survey results. KPS3 will also be supporting ongoing outreach activities as part of the special enrollment period, including press release support, assistance with media interview arrangements, assistance with social media communications, and assistance with other appropriate communication tools to help spread the message about who qualifies for this special enrollment. While Xerox has been tasked to manage the follow-up outreach to consumers who qualify for the special enrollment period through mail, phone, and email, KPS3 has offered support and assistance to help reach these groups. Now shifting to outreach, there are metrics below for all outreach activities since April 20th, 2013, the first day of outreach by KPS3, all the way through the end of open enrollment. The outreach was an addition to that provided again by our wonderful exchange enrollment facilitators as part of their service. The outreach cost per touch was a remarkable 40 cents statewide. So I'm not going to necessarily go through each one of these metrics, but you'll see that we had presence at over 1,000 events. We had over 1.6 million touch points, including over 500,000 people in attendance at these events, 36,000 people that were talked to one-on-one, just over half a million people, half a million pieces of literature, and 500,000 individuals reached through our door-to-door campaign, and that we'll discuss later in the report. There's also over 9,000 individuals reached through the Home Visit Network program, the small group sessions in volunteer hosts and hostesses' homes. The original outreach touchpoint goal for the campaign for the entire period was just over 1 million. The goal was exceeded by 582,767 touchpoints. Additionally, the Ramirez Group and Mi Familia Voto were hired to conduct Nevada HealthLink outreach through a critical door-to-door campaign in both northern and southern Nevada, with an extra focus on southern Nevada. The project began back in November of last year and continued all the way through the end of March. The organization's efforts were coordinated to ensure that we didn't have overlap. The total reach goal was 450,800 members of our target audience through that door-to-door canvassing, which was exceeded by almost 100,000 individuals. For those homes at which no one answered, of course, Nevada HealthLink door hangers were left, which included information about the exchange and how to get help enrolling. Both organizations also utilized a lead generation system to follow up with those individuals and families who would like to make enrollment appointments with a Navigator organization. And then let's talk a little bit about enrollment events. The Get Healthy, Get Covered. 2 final enrollment events were held on Saturday, March 29th, one here in Las Vegas at the Cashman Center and one in Reno at Truckee Meadows Community College. A variety of teams came together to host thousands of Nevadans looking for enrollment assistance. The event in the North was organized and led by KPS3 and exchange staff with excellent support from the Ramirez Group, Nevada Primary Care Association, Division of Welfare and Supportive Services, Washoe County, Nevada Fish, Adriana Barack Obama Organizing for Action Nevada, Xerox technical staff, and of course Truckee Meadows Community Center facilities, or Community College, facilities. This event also hosted 18 nonprofit organizational booths for consumers to visit and gather health-related information. Guests were asked to check in, and they were called to one of the 3 computer labs where 20-plus team members assisted and answered questions and facilitated enrollments. Approximately 500 Northern Nevadans attended the event, and approximately 200 household applications were started and or addressed. Many attendees came to the event to get their account issues resolved. The responses from consumers leaving the computer labs were positive, citing relief and gratitude for this assistance. The event in the South was organized and led by the Ramirez Group with support from navigators, state and county-based groups, volunteers, Xerox, and KPS3's outreach staff, along with volunteers from the following organizations. We had Leaders in Training, Project 150, Sunrise Mountain High School, Bonanza High School, AmeriCorps, ATEC Key Club, CSN Serves, ATEC National Honor Society, United Way of Southern Nevada, Canyon Springs High School, SOL, Bonanza High School Key Club, UNLV, and UNLV DECA. So as you can see, we had a lot of support from a lot of our partners and stakeholders in this last date push on these enrollment events. AmeriGroup Health Plan in Nevada, AmeriGroup Health Plan in Nevada and Nevada Health Co-op participated in the health fair, provided valuable information to help attendees better understand their plans before meeting with exchange enrollment facilitators. Anthem was invited to participate but declined to respond. The carriers also assisted in enrolling people into plans once it became clear that the demand for enrollment assistance was so great. So these events was scheduled from 8 to 8, but since there were so many people in attendance, our team stayed until 2 a.m. to complete all the applications. Xerox kept a team that helped people resolve errors until midnight. Attendance at the event was estimated to be approximately 13,000 individuals. From the success of the event, both in the number of attendees and in the number of enrollments conducted, this is definitely a format that should be considered in the next open enrollment period to reach large groups of people. As far as advertising, final reach, frequency, and impression metrics for media placed through the end of open enrollment are being compiled now, along with that final added value, which tallies the free time and space KPS3 negotiated to promote the Get Healthy, Get Covered enrollment event. Full campaign media metrics will be included in that post-campaign analysis and report. However, the metrics outlined below show that the campaign had already exceeded original projections as we moved into the last month of open enrollment. Projected reach is at 90.8% for the entire campaign through February 20, 2014, and we have been successful in achieving 98.2%. Projected frequency, that number of times an individual in our audience is presented with our message for the entire length of the campaign, is 25.3 times. Through February 28, 2014, we have achieved 30.2 times, exceeding the original projection. Projected impressions for the length of the campaign was 95.07 million, including projected digital impressions at 30 million. And through the end of February, we have already overachieved 126.8 million impressions. So the campaign added value goal was $825,000, and we have already garnered $827,637 in added value through February. And again, the numbers for March will be produced at the next report. The digital campaign specifically contributed to the web traffic via high click-through rates, exceeding industry benchmarks on all accounts. So from October 1st through March 31st, over that open enrollment, 35.9 million impressions were served. The overall campaign's click-through rates finished consistent and strong as it has been for some time, ending at about 0.15%, which is fantastic. The industry standard is 0.05 to 0.06. Over 281,000 page loads of the enrollment homepage can be tied to the media exposure. And this is great value and demonstrates that the media campaign was effective at having an impact in motivating people to visit the enrollment homepage. Pre-roll video portion of the campaign, those commercials that play before viewing an online video, garnered 2.7 million impressions and 700,000 viewers watched the video in its entirety, all 60 seconds without clicking out of it. The paid advertising portion of the campaign also included placement on the social sites YouTube and Pandora, two channels designed to specifically reach that young invincible population. For the two sites, from January 1st through February 27, 2014, overall click-through rates was an astounding 0.49%. Specifically, YouTube click-through rates was 0.64% and Pandora was 0.43%. These metrics are 12 times and 8 times the industry standard, respectively. And at this time, I will turn this over to Ms. Carrie Eaton to provide the quality assurance activities for this time period.
Thank you, Carrie Eaton, for the record. The quality assurance plan was approved by the board on December 12, 2013. That plan outlines performance and outcome metrics and evaluation methods to include existing metrics reported to Centers for Consumer Information and Insurance Oversight, also known as CIO, operational benchmarks and vendor performance, and peripheral services and operations. This quarterly report will address the activities and outcomes for the period through March 31st, 2014. And significant functionality for gathering this data and reporting has still not been developed by the exchange's vendor to date, so we do have some gaps in the ability to gain this information. The quality assurance team at the exchange has been submitting weekly metrics to CIO, which were to be collected during open enrollment, but they have decided to continue those through May 17th. A more detailed list of data elements are required to be reported to CIO on a quarterly basis, and many of these elements are not yet developed yet through our reporting technology, and which this is common through most of the exchanges, so CIO is aware of that. For our operational benchmarks and vendor performance, we use the 5 goals outlined in our strategic plan. The first goal is to increase the number of insured persons in Nevada. Our result was 25,899 insured individuals in a QHP as of March 31st, 2014. Of course, this was short of our 118,000 goal. Our second goal was facilitate the purchase and sale of health insurance. There are 4 metrics or 4 benchmarks for this goal. The call center average time to answer calls, the call center target average abandonment rate. We were over on those benchmarks, so we did not meet those goals. Appeals, we did not have any level 2 appeals, meaning we didn't have any appeals that reached hearings, so we did meet the third benchmark of having no more than 1 level 2 appeal per 1,000 enrollees. And then the last benchmark was reach 10,000 of unsubsidized individuals during 2014, and we reached 3,660 unsubsidized individuals. The third goal is for our SHOP to assist qualified employers in the enrollment and purchase of health coverage and the application for subsidies. And the benchmark was to enroll 300 employers by January. And we obviously didn't have the need for, employers didn't have as great of a need as was expected, and we reached 8 employers. And then our fourth goal was use targeted outreach campaign to educate consumers on open enrollment dates. And as Damon said in his report, this was very successful. We did meet the benchmark of 50% awareness by December, and we succeeded it with a 98.2% awareness. And the attendance by at least 20,000 Nevadans from July 2013 to March 2014, we exceeded with 568,690 people in attendance. And then our last goal, assist residents of Nevada to access to programs, premium assistance tax credits, and cost sharing reductions. We did not reach the goal of having at least 30% of new enrollees reach Shop and Compare in their first session going through the application, but we did reach the goal of having at least 40% of new enrollees select a QHP within 7 days of their first session. We did exceed that with 71%. The third component focuses on peripheral services and operations, including oversight and monitoring of carriers, plans, producers, and grantees. We did have limited data for this first open enrollment. So most of these were not completed during the first open enrollment. However, random audits and things like that are being prepared for the next open enrollment. Thank you.
All right, I'd like to open it up for board members to ask questions or make comments about these reports. And Ms. Eaton and Mr. Haycock will be available to answer questions. So, do we have any questions from board members?
Madam Chair, this is Leslie Johnstone. I would just have one comment. Kudos to the staff on getting 0 findings on the audit from Kafori and Company.
Thank you. Any other?
Florence Jameson, I was just going to give congratulations to the successful enrollment program last weekend. Well done, and we look forward to many more.
Any questions?
Madam Chair, this is Lynn Atkins.
Yes, Ms. Atkins.
I have one or two comments and one or two questions. I stopped by the Cashman Field, the Cashman Center Enrollment Fair last Saturday, or the 29th, and was just blown away and could not believe the number of people that were inside, that were in line, that were helping. It was just a all hands on deck, an incredible event, and definitely something that we should be doing in the future. It really was a place for people to come, talk to someone, get help. If there was any technology issues, Xerox was there to help fix those. It was Medicaid applications. It was just everything, and then the vendors. And so, in general, I thought it was a very, very great event, and I just could not believe the amount of people that came there. So I just wanted to say that I did stop by and thought that was terrific. I do have two questions, though. One is for the special enrollment session. I know all of this report is really pretty much historical, and in here it says KPS3 is going to be helping with special enrollment, which I'm glad, and I know I've talked to Sean and a couple people offline about this, but I was just wondering if there is a written plan in place for the next, I guess we're at 50 days now for special enrollment, regarding the press releases and the media and all of that, and who's going to be doing what and when they're going to be doing it, and if that could be shared with the board. So that's my first, and then I have one other question for Damon.
So Damon Haycock for the record. I'm going to ask Stephanie Cruz from KPS3 to come up to our testimony table to answer your first question, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Stephanie Cruz for the record. Yes, there is a plan that is being crafted as we speak. We just met with the exchange staff and have a number of tactics and strategies that we are going to implement. We're going to be backing up the exchange staff with press releases and public relations, social media. We've kind of put social media on hold, but we're going to reactivate that and use a very active social media site or two to get the information out. And then we also have planned a public service style television ad that we will be running for placement, paid placement, and also for as much free spots as we can negotiate, as we've been negotiating in the past. So even though Xerox has been tasked to go after directly the people who they have in their database, we feel that it's a public service to try to clarify who is eligible to go back into the process in open enrollment, and wanted to reach beyond that narrow focus. So yes, there is a plan. We have it outlined and can certainly get that to the board by tomorrow very easily.
That would be great. Thank you. And I also did want to say that, especially the week prior to the last day of open enrollment, I mean, it just seemed like we were all over the media, and in good ways primarily, but really getting the word out through news reports. You couldn't turn on a news station that week prior without hearing that open enrollment was ending and that this enrollment fair was going on and everything. So I was just really pleased about all of that. So yes, as soon as you get that, that would be great to share with us. And I just want to make sure the messaging, the language is right on who we are trying to reach. And then my other question is for Damon and or Shauna, I guess, and I know we kind of talked about this before, the grants that we're going to be applying for in May, when would we maybe see just a list of the items and amounts that we're going to be asking for? That's all, not any micromanaging parts of it, but really just kind of we're asking, you know, $4 million for this or $2 million for this or whatever it is.
For the record, Damon Haycock, and I'm sure Shauna can chime in after I'm done, but we are in the process of finalizing those exact items and our projected dollar amounts, and I would imagine the next couple of weeks we'll be able to send out a notice to the board to let them know what we have so far planned, and then we can take, of course, additional guidance as necessary.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments for staff? Okay, I'd like to make a request of staff and then make a comment. As we proceed into this next year, 2015, and especially as we're contemplating this per member per month fee, I would like to see if we could get maybe a little bit more detailed budget from staff on how we're tracking against that, so that if we do need to make any adjustments during that year, that staff or that the board is up to speed on what's going on. And maybe, I know Shauna and Damon do this, but maybe with Ms. Teska can help develop something that's not, I don't want to detailed to the point that we lose people on it, but just so that the board knows, are we on track with the budget, or are we getting off track? Do we need to kind of step back and reassess?
We can include that on a monthly basis,
Okay.
if that would be okay with you. And then as we can bring that back, and then we can add additional information if you find that, certain areas you want a further in-depth experience into our budgeting process.
Right. If we need to make adjustments, I don't want it to appear we're doing knee-jerk adjustments to things, that it's been thoughtful and that the board's fully up to speed on what's going on in the budget.
Absolutely. The staff does their projections on a yearly basis, so we do know what is coming, where we see that there may be potential issues coming up. So we should always know a month out, 6 months out, where there is a potential issue, so that we can take the action necessary to avert any catastrophes. So we will start bringing that back to the board monthly.
Okay. And then my last statement is really a compliment to the staff and to everyone that's worked on this project during open enrollment. I think the board has been really very focused on the QHP, and what I'd like to do is step back and look at the whole state of Nevada, because if we look at what's been accomplished, one of our primary goal was to get people insured that were not insured here in the state. And I think as of March 31st, we can say that there have been 150,000 new individuals go on the insured rolls, either through Medicaid, CHIP, and the QHPs. And I really want to compliment everyone on that, because that's 25% of the total uninsured in the state of Nevada. That's a success. So thank you all. I just didn't want it to go unnoticed. And I do think we need to give a global look to it as we go forward, because we've accomplished a lot, even though we're a little disappointed on the QHP side. So with that, let's move. We're going to skip agenda item number 6. Let's do an update on agenda item number 7, which is the recruitment of the executive director.
Thank you, Carrie Eaton, for the record. The purpose of this report is to update the board with information regarding the progress of the current recruitment efforts and proposals received by interested recruiting agencies to assist in the recruitment process of the executive director. This recruitment efforts began in March, where we placed advertising in the Reno Gazette-Journal, CareerBuilder.com, Las Vegas Review-Journal, Monster.com, Insurance Journal, Facebook, Twitter, and the National Academy for State Health Policy. And our board chair has received 30 potential candidates as of April 9th through those efforts alone. At the March 27th board meeting, staff was directed to initiate a solicitation for qualified executive recruiting agencies to submit proposals. And the solicitation request was posted on the Exchange website on March 28, 2014. It is attached as attachment 7A to this report. And unfortunately, we did not receive any new requests from that solicitation, new proposals from that solicitation request. So staff did reach out to the agencies that we had been in contact with previously, and in the table below, you can see the cost and payment options that they had provided, and none of them were interested in submitting a final proposal, as they could either not meet the requirements, the financial requirements of the board, they couldn't commit to the workload, or did not even respond to our requests. So our recommendation is to provide guidance to staff on the use of a recruiting agency to fill the executive director position. Thank you.
All right. It looks like the fees associated with a recruiting agency exceed the limitations that we put on it. If we go over that amount, then we have to go through an RFP process. And as I understand it, Ms. Eaton, you can help me on this, that could be about a 6-month process, is that?
That's correct.
So I think that puts us back at the option that we had 6 or 7 weeks ago. So, and as Ms. Eaton said, I have between 25 and 30 applicants that I've received through my email address, and I think one's been received here at the office. So I don't know that we need to, I don't know what discussion the board wants to have with this, but I think we've reverted back to option number 1.
This is Lynn. Unfortunately, for a variety of reasons and how busy you are as well, I think that does sound like it might just be the best solution at this point.
I don't know, do we have, I don't think that this is an action item or the board needs to take any action because we've done it before this. I guess the action would be not to continue with the recruiting agency solicitation.
This is Dr. Ford. I so move.
Dr. Jameson, did you say since we're just reverting back to what's already happening, do we actually need to make a motion?
We need to tell staff to quit soliciting recruiting agencies.
Oh, okay. I second the motion for staff to stop soliciting recruiting agencies.
Thank you. That does sound awful, but you know, they've all got a lot on their plate, so. All right, we have a motion and a second to direct staff that they no longer need to solicit any recruiting agencies. I think I've restated it. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Motion carries. Agenda item number 9 will be heard next week. Again, we will solicit times that are that work for the board members, and that will be the only item on the agenda that day. Most likely next Thursday. And then moving on to the report from Deloitte. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped over it. Thank you, Mr. Roos. Item number 9, the enrollment statistics. 8.
Carrie Eaton for the record. This is an informational report to provide the board with application and enrollment statistics through the end of open enrollment, March 31st, 2014. During the 6 months of open enrollment, the exchange collected statistics on many different factors, which included applications started, eligibility determinations, confirmed plan selections, enrollment by various categories such as carrier, service area, age bracket, and some demographics. Many other factors have been collected in the web portal, but not all of them are available for reporting. And this report covers the general statistics of enrollment and shows the overview for both open enrollment and continued enrollment through April 5th, 2014. The continued open enrollment figures through April 5th, include pending enrollments from the open enrollment period that were in the resolution stages. These may be accounts that did not yet show payments being received or sent over to the carriers as of the 31st. So for the overview, you can see in the chart that the application started as of March 31st was 443,000, and as of April 5th, 450,000. And the determinations, eligibility determinations from a complete application was 382,874 as of the end of open enrollment, and was up to 386,956 as of April 5th. Of those, there were 222,089 confirmed plan selections, which include Medicaid CHIP, QHP, and dental. And this does not include Medicaid and CHIP numbers where they went directly to the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services. And of those numbers, we ended up with 25,899 individuals enrolled in a qualified health plan as of March 31st, 2014. And those numbers include paid individuals and do not include individuals who had scheduled payments. And that number had jumped up to 28,208 as of April 5th, 2014. Then I do have some charts below, and these are all using the enrollment numbers as of March 31st, 2014 for effectuated enrollment in a QHP, so the 25,899 figure. So there are graphs showing the carrier enrollment amount. As you can see, Health Plan Nevada and Nevada Co-op were neck and neck in their enrollments. And then our service area by a QHP, Clark and Nye County took over 50%, 68% of the state's enrollment. And then we have enrollment statistics by age. And there's a large chunk for 0 to 17 and 45 to 54. So those are the largest chunks of age groups that are being enrolled in a QHP. And then these giant graphs here by individuals with effectuated enrollment by attested race. So this is the race that they attested in their applications. And if you have any questions on these, I will be happy to. Oh, I have one more thing that's not in the report. We did get some federal poverty level statistics that was requested by the board. And it appears that 151% to 200% of the federal poverty level makes up the most of our effectuated and QHP enrollments at 32.3%. And I can just go down the line here. 138% of the federal poverty level was 4.8% of total QHP enrollments. 12.7% made up 139 to 150% of the federal poverty level. 32.3% for the 151 to 200% federal poverty level. 20.3% for the 201 to 250% of the federal poverty level, 8.8% for 251 to 300% of the federal poverty level, 4.5% for 301 to 350% of the federal poverty level, and 2.2% for the 351 to 400% of the poverty level. And there were 14.4% that enrolled in a QHP that were over the 400% of the federal poverty level. So if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer.
Madam Chair, Dr. Ford, I have a question.
Yes. Go ahead, please, Dr. Ford.
So I have two questions. So first, how can there be more applications started after 3/31? Because I thought the special enrollment were only for people already in the system. And then my second question to that is, do we have any sense of how many applications are duplicates?
So for the record, Shauna DeRoos, I can answer both of those, I think. The duplicate answer, what we are finding right now is, especially with the numbers that are going over to welfare and supportive services, we're looking at about a 12% duplicate rate. These are individuals that for whatever reason put in more than one application. The exchange, even though we know there may have been a duplicate application, we have an obligation to send every application over to welfare and supportive services, and then they make the decision whether or not to follow up on that. Mike Wilden mentioned yesterday that they had found an additional 3,500 duplicate applications last week that they were able to say we don't have to follow up on these because they had already gone through their system. So right now, running at about 12%. Now, the reason that you see an increased number of applications after March 31st, there are two reasons for that. One is, yes, we talked about the people who were already known to the boss. So if you had started your application and you had a HIX ID prior to March 31st, you could come back in, hit resume, and go all the way through. If for some reason you had an unresolvable error or some other reason that you could not get through that application, you can still start a brand new application and follow it all the way through the end. You are still known to the boss. So there may be a new HIX ID created because you had to start a new application. That's one reason. The second reason is that we are also taking attestations of those people who tried to come in. And this is very similar to what the federal government is doing. We're following their lead there. A person can attest, I tried, I was not able to start an application, I was unable to get through, and therefore they are also coming in and starting a new application during this special enrollment period. So there's several different methods or reasons why we would have an increase of applications after the 31st.
Any other questions?
Lawrence Jameson in Las Vegas.
Yes, Dr. Jameson.
Oh, so originally I don't remember our discussion including that one group that the federal government was including. I thought we had to find them all somewhere, even if it was at the very. But I'm glad right in the group. I'm okay about that. The second is when she was giving us the percentages on the federal poverty level broken down, I didn't see that. Did she send that part, or if not, can she send a?
Dr. Jameson, that is a report that I asked staff to get from Xerox last week after our meeting. I thought it would be very important to see where our success rate is as compared to where those enrollees are with respect to the federal poverty level. Those reports just started to come in about 10 o'clock this morning. And so I know that they're finishing gathering them up, and we'll have them sent out to the board later today or tomorrow. But we got it by number of enrollees and also by percentages. And I just, within the last hour, saw the one by number of enrollees.
Madam Chair, this is Lynn.
Yes, Ms. Atkins?
I just have two questions. Shauna, how hard would it be to do the statistics also from April 1st on? Because I'm assuming that we should see a higher successful enrollment rate, right? Because we assume all these folks are either in the special enrollment group, or they're having their own qualifying life event, or they're Medicaid, and so I would assume that they would be having a more successful time getting in. So is it possible, when we see these again, to separate everything out from April 1st on as well?
Lynn, I will check with the team on that, and we can bring that back to the board at the next meeting and see what we can provide to you. I hesitate to give you a definitive answer without checking with the team.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate that. And then my second question is, at the last board meeting, I had asked Xerox, I think, for us to, if we could have the number of scheduled payments, and I don't see that anywhere here, and I don't know if anyone has that or if we can get that.
So we can provide that to you. It does come out on our weekly report, and I apologize that we didn't bring that back to you today. We can, when we provide the FPL information to you later today, we will include that number.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments for Ms. Eaton?
Florence Jameson, I just wanted to clarify. So are we remember Lynn had talked about last time those number of people that had tried to enroll and then they did not include a large group of them, and we wondered what happened to them, and they were going to let us know?
Right. This is Lynn. I think I can't remember what meeting that was, but for purposes of special enrollment, we agreed that it was anybody who attempted to get into the system and couldn't. And yes, the stats I think that they had brought didn't include those a while back, but since then I think we've all decided that it is the very large number, and that I think is why Shauna was saying that anyone who either had the HIX number and didn't do it, or can attest that they attempted to get in the system and were kicked out for some reason, that we're going to be allowing all of those folks to come in and get coverage within the next 60 days. Is that right, Shauna?
Okay. Florence Jameson, yeah, we were just going to get something back from Xerox that said if they thought it was a figure in the range of 10, 20, 50, 100,000 people. She had that beautiful spreadsheet. Do you remember that? But if you just think it was an extremely large number, I think they have it down here, Greg.
Is this question for me?
No, I believe that we have somebody from Xerox coming up to answer the question for
Thank
Dr.
you.
Jameson.
Good afternoon. This is Greg Vidiello from Xerox, for the record. I actually have two answers for you. One, on the scheduled ACH payments, there are 4,332 that are scheduled. That comes off of the board report that Shauna was referring to earlier. And then regarding the number of people who had started the process but didn't complete the process, meaning they didn't get through the application. Now, again, this number has duplicates in it because the only thing they may have done is gone in and actually set up an account, but may not have put in a whole bunch of all of the demographic information necessary. There's approximately 65,000 people in that. What our team is looking at is if we have a known email address or some other identifying information, such as a telephone number or or an address, then we will reach out to those folks. But again, as Ms. Ekins had indicated earlier, all of those individuals will still be eligible to come in. And again, there are quite a few duplicates in there. Hard to pull out the duplicates, just so you understand on that one, because we may not have enough of the demographic information to be able to go in and easily identify if there's more than one individual who applied.
Dr. Jameson, does that answer your question? And Ms. Atkins?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, this is Lynn. Thank you. And I guess, though, a follow-up. That's a lot of people who schedule payments. I'm absolutely thrilled to hear that number. You said 4,332. Is that right?
That's what I wrote down.
And so since all of these are scheduled for plans, I'm assuming to start May 1st, are all of these April payments? I mean, am I thinking about that correctly?
Ms. Ekins, actually that I'll have to get back to you on, because that may also include people who are already enrolled. So I'm just speaking of scheduled payments from the IVR perspective, the ACH perspective.
Okay,
not
yeah,
necessarily,
I see what you're saying. So yes, I think the question I had was how many more can we add to the people who have already paid, who have scheduled payments for their insurance to start, not for people who are just kind of paying monthly.
Understood. So that information we'll have to get back to you on. I apologize. Maybe we misunderstood the request.
I think to simplify the request, I think on scheduled payments, we're looking to see how many new enrollees are in that scheduled payment, so that we're not adding, if I've scheduled a payment but I've been in since January, you wouldn't want to count me as a new enrollee. And I can see your caution in wanting to answer that question, but it really relates to who's scheduled, who's new, who's brand new.
I understand, Ms. Campbell. So we'll look at it from that perspective and get that answer. And we'll send it separate from the board meeting. So now our next board meeting is in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from board members?
Madam Chair, this is Leslie Johnstone.
Yes, Ms. Johnstone.
I would just ask that on future reports, if we can segregate the special enrollment activity between the individuals that had a qualifying life event and everybody else.
So Ms. Johnstone, Greg Vidiello again, we'll work to try to accomplish that and try to be able to provide you with that information.
All right. Ms. Johnstone, some of the comment I'm getting from up here is that might be very, very difficult to do. But I think it would be easy to do after special enrollment. How many new enrollees for qualifying health events? But yeah, just so that you know, I'm getting some feedback that might be a difficult task. but they will move along to see if they can get it done. Any other questions? All right, then I will, let's see, number 9, agenda item 9 then is scheduled for next week. We'll let you know time and place. Now we're moving on to agenda item number 10 for the assessment of the boss from Deloitte, which I believe is going to be mostly a verbal presentation today. Make sure the light's green, okay? And then if you'll both identify yourself for the record,
Sure.
please.
For the records, I'm Deb Saha, working on the Nevada assessment project from Deloitte.
And for the record, I'm Philip Brosnick, also with Deloitte, working on the Silver State Health Insurance Exchange assessment.
Thank you, gentlemen. Who's going to get started?
I'll start.
All right. Thank you, Deb.
So, Madam Chair, we have the slide deck that's attached to the link, and I'm going to use that. So there are 4 slides, and sorry, I'm going to start with the slide. Sorry, there are 3 slides. I'm going to start with slide 1. Sorry. As part of the background, what Deloitte was engaged to do was to conduct an assessment of the SSHIX functionality, the product that including processes and technologies. Our goal was to make sure that we identify strengths, gaps, and issues, and then provide remediation options. And we are conducting this in 2 phases, the discovery phase and the analysis phase. For the discovery phase, which is phase 1, we actually gathered data that's related to interviews, data related to documents from both the Exchange team and the Xerox team. And the phase 2 would be the analysis phase. That's, again, reviewing the documents, reviewing the interviewing information that we get, and then provide the gaps, issues, and provide strengths, and also provide remediation options. So the team has divided, the Deloitte team has been categorized into 6 teams. So the 1, project management, governance, solution, functionality, technology as it relates to the SDLC process, and technology as it relates to the data center infrastructure, and technology as it relates to security. And then the 6th one is call center. Next slide is the...
Yeah, before you go on, would you do something, there's an acronym that people that aren't familiar with this might not know what it means.
Standard development life cycle. So basically what that means would be going through requirements, looking at design, development, and then testing, user acceptance testing, and then finally implementation. Sure. Next slide, slide 2. Phase 1 is the one that we just finished, discovery, last week. We completed 102 interviews. We requested 188 documents, and there are no documents outstanding at this point. We began end-to-end system testing, working with the Xerox team. We're testing some of the functionalities, not everything, but just sample of functionality. We are also reviewing coding practices, standards that's been used on this, from the Xerox team. And part of the phase 1 is the deliverable 1. We call that status report. And there we will have in the status report key tasks completed and our preliminary observations. And the deliverable is expected to be approved tomorrow on the 11th. We're working with the Exchange team and working through what we call the review, resolve, taking comments from the Xerox team, from the Exchange team, and then finally sending it to the Exchange team for approval. So we expect that to occur tomorrow. So what's coming, what's we are working on, just began to work on, is the analysis phase. That's phase 2, which is all the documents, basically finding and analyzing the data that we gathered both from the interviews that we conducted and the documents we received. I'm going to summarize the findings, and obviously the last step is to provide you remediation options. On the right-hand side, in the box in the middle, is the deliverable 2 assessment. It will, again, kind of things that I said earlier, which would be, two chapters, if you will, of the deliverable. And then we will work with the same process as the deliverable 1, work with the Exchange team, and then our expectation is the deliverable will be approved on Friday the 25th, which is the end of the 5th week. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. Do any of the board members have questions of Deloitte on the progress of this analysis or assessment?
Florence Jameson, just to say I'm impressed by the progress. All the 102 interviews, the 188 documents, and that everyone had been obtained in this short period of time. I just am very impressed. Well done.
Thank you. And it's really a joint effort from all 3 parties, Deloitte, Xerox, and Exchange team.
Thank you for making that statement. I like to hear that it's a joint effort between all 3 of the parties. That's very positive. And Mr. Roos, you wanted to talk about the review process with the board members?
I did. Thank you. Shauna Drews for the record. So as you heard from Deb, we did have the first deliverable for this contract. And as you can see in your report, the expected deliverable approval date is tomorrow. This is not the final deliverable. This would be just after the first 2 weeks. It is a summary of the high-level findings. And there was a deliverable review team that was put together to review this on this very, very short notice. You all know that this happened very quickly. The next deliverable that is coming through, what usually happens is we receive our deliverable from the vendor, from Deloitte. We get 5 days or so to review the deliverable, provide feedback, go over that document with them. We have a discourse back and forth, any changes that are made, and then they bring back the final deliverable to the Exchange for approval. I think that we absolutely would love to have some board member feedback in this next process for the final deliverable. And my understanding is we can have up to 3 board members who would then be part of the final review, final markup, that information going back and forth, and then helping us to formulate the final document that we would accept back from Deloitte. So at this time, I'm asking for volunteers from the board to join us in that process for the next deliverable. And as it'll be, just so you know the time frame and the amount of effort that would be involved, the deliverable is due back to Deloitte on the 25th. We get it on Monday the 21st is the plan. That week, we would need to get together and have a couple of meetings. We could do that. For those of you in the South, we could have some video conferences. And so you don't have to be here in Carson City. And so I would love to take some volunteers.
And if I might add a little bit more comment to it, certainly this assessment reaches outside the scope of most of our areas of expertise, but I do think this would be an opportunity for board members to listen and learn more about the process rather than being expected to be an active participant in it. So I don't think you have days yet that you know or times yet It may be that there's 1 or 2 meetings where a member or 2 members sit in, and then the following day someone else might sit in on it. But if you have an interest in doing that, you can express that interest now or send a note back to Shauna, and she can keep you updated on the times and the date so that so we can see if it works with your schedule.
Florence Jameson, how much time did you think this would take? The meetings would be like 1 hour or 3 to 4 hours. Would they be daytime or after work hours?
The meetings would be held during the day, and I would expect that the final deliverable will be longer than the current deliverable. I would plan on at least 1 to 2 hours of pre-review time, and then 2 to 3 hours at least as a group to go over that deliverable, and then another hour or so as final commentary is received back to make sure that all of the comments that we discussed during the team would be integrated into that final document.
And that's why I'm suggesting you may not want to commit to the whole time, but maybe a selected hour or 2 to listen, and it I think would provide us with a real educational tool as we move forward.
Madam Chair, this is Leslie Johnstone. I would be interested in helping.
Dr. Jameson, if you have time, do you have an interest?
I have a definite interest, and I would love to. I would like to commit to listening in on much of it. Again, it would depend on the length and when they schedule it.
Okay, and also I would invite our ex officio members also to sit in on that. You can always count on me for an hour or 2. I just don't know what date or what time.
I will let
this
you
is
know as
Lynn.
soon
It
as
would
possible.
depend on days and times as well. So I'd be interested in hearing about that.
Yeah,
And,
I think staff
Madam
will.
Chair, this is
Really,
Levon
sir,
Lewis.
I'd be interested in that. I just, as with the rest, I'm just not entirely sure about my dates and my availability. I do have an hour or 2 here, and they're available.
Madam Chair, this is Levon Lewis. I would also be interested in, once I get the times and checking to see my availability, but certainly to be available for the pre-review that would be taking 2 or 3 hours, not in a formal meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I think it'd be great, and staff will just monitor to make sure that we have no more than 3 members at any one time. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate everyone's interest in doing that with staff. So do we have any other questions for Deloitte at all? I don't know at this point we have enough information to ask good questions just yet, but doesn't sound like it. So thank you. We'll close this agenda item and move on to the Xerox report and the carrier update on moving the individual billing back to the carriers. So if I can get you to identify yourself for the record.
Yes, for the record, I'm Daniel Green with Xerox. And I'll apologize in advance. This is my first testimony. So if I violate any board protocol, please put me back into line. I'm actually more of a tactical resource. So I also have a tendency to slip into the acronyms. So also keep me in line along those lines. And I know Greg down in the south, and I believe Kristen will also be helping with any questions that I can't cover. I think they're at the table. My role has been as the director for health insurance exchange implementation within the Xerox community. And as such, I spent time in Kentucky, Florida, Arizona, and of course here in Nevada. I've been dedicated, though, since November of last year to all things Nevada financial management. So, and I've been designated as the project lead for Xerox in this engagement to follow up on the board's request for the transition of aggregate billing. I'm going through the presentation as was uploaded to the board site. So I'm walking through a paper version, but I'll do my best to crosswalk. I'm on the second slide with the title March 27th Exchange Board Request. The short version is that Xerox is fully committed to following the board's direction on any rollout or any evaluation, and I can tell you that I'm fully committed to the tight collaboration with the exchange and with carriers in making this happen. And I think we've received some positive feedback over the last week or so that the collaboration has been well received. So on slide 3, in the interest of time, the summary status. The working sessions have made excellent progress, I believe. We initiated with the dissemination of the board materials from the 20th and 27th board, as well as a list of considerations in and around the planning and execution of the transition. We have conducted working sessions with HPN, Co-op, Anthem, St. Mary's, and Nevada Dental Benefits. We still have dedicated conversations to occur with the remaining carriers. However, we did have a discussion last evening from about 4 till about 5:30 or so, and I believe we had representatives of most, if not all, of the carriers. It was a review to walk through the material that you're looking at right now and to solicit feedback on, to verify that the considerations and feedback we've captured was dutiful and appropriately representative of the comments. The Nevada Association of Health Plans on that call indicated that the analysis and timing of their March 20th documentation still stands in terms of recommendations and timelines and status. And I believe the dental carriers have provided public comment associated to the board. For next steps, in short, additional due diligence is going to be necessary to complete a detailed plan for the transition. Fully committed to making the transition work. But the working sessions we have identified some very specific areas that will need a little more detail, and specifically connecting with other states that have successfully rolled out a model similar to this. I think the comment was, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, so let's make sure that we learn the lessons from the other states who have been through this process. We have a couple of issues that I can speak to in detail if needed, either during or after, that are more complex IT scenarios, and they just need a few brighter minds in the room to work through some of the mechanics. And then we need to spend some time on pilots and or what I would call staggered implementation, which is some but not all carriers initiate the process, or what I also call a big bang implementation, which the other state exchanges who operate in this model, essentially all carriers at once in a cutover. So there are some positives and negatives and pros and cons to each of those options. And it's not a long conversation, but it's something that we want to walk through and do our due diligence on. And there's some conversation that in the discussions we've had with carriers, I have not solicited any feedback or discussion about rates or costs. So that's a discussion I know that the exchange and carriers may have in working sessions or one-on-one, but the conversations haven't gone to a level of detail or any advocacy on a structure related to rates or costs of the transition. So moving to slide 4, universally the feedback in the working sessions as well as our conference calls and review is that there was not necessarily a baseline understanding of what it meant to be the transition of aggregate billing in the individual marketplace. So we did spend a lot of time, I think it was fruitful efforts at the whiteboard and documents and phone conversations to make sure that the it that's being transitioned is clear. And there's a couple key points that we're speaking of the individual marketplace per the board's direction, and that, as I mentioned, we're not reinventing the wheel. There are other successful models that we can follow and learn lessons. In this model, however, that could, per the board direction, be facilitated here is that Xerox would continue, and I'll slip into some more detail speak here because it's an important feedback point from all carriers that the detail in some of these areas is critical. One is what we've called the single streamlined application, or the SSA, as you may have heard about it, but in essence what the consumer goes through to evaluate their eligibility from Medicaid and CHIP through to no eligibility for QHPs, so anywhere across that spectrum. The calculation of the APTC, or Advanced Premium Tax Credit. Now, that's one thing we call the maximum APTC, which is what we get when going through the single streamline application, as well as what we call the elected or allocated APTC, which is that the consumer has the choice to utilize the maximum APTC or some lesser amount. And there are very detailed rules about essential health benefits that would govern that. Plan shopping, quoting, and selection. So in essence, the shopping experience, as well as transmission of enrollment information via the EDI 834. That's a file protocol between systems to conduct the actual enrollment, or in some scenarios, QLEs, or qualifying life events. Things along changes, having a baby, other special enrollment periods. There are 18 specific conditions in the Affordable Care Act that those would continue to be administered through what I call the HIX portal. The transition items, again, in a little bit more detail, would be the generation of a binder invoice. And from a terminology perspective, that would be the first invoice where a consumer completed the application and made their shopping decision and enrolled and said yes. In the portal, we call that the confirm and submit button. At this point, data would transfer and the carriers would pick up the generation of that first-time invoice, and subsequent to that, they would control the generation of recurring monthly invoices. So month over month communication with the consumer about their premiums, their APTC, and any payments that have been collected or other accounting adjustments. That the carriers would conduct delinquency outreach, meaning specific contact with the consumer to the extent that there's a late payment in a particular coverage month. And that there would be a protocol set up to, quote unquote, a return EDI 834, some other file mechanism where carriers could say, yes, we received the data for that binder invoice, and indeed the consumer has done their part to effectuate coverage. And also that as a result of the delinquency proceedings, that there may be a termination that we would need to get information from for non-payment from the carriers to reflect that in the HIX portal. The last two items here were identified as, my word, commodities, meaning that there are banking operations as practical as literally the account and reconciliation activity of monthly statements, or what I would call the payment channels. So mechanisms like a voice response unit, or taking payments over a website, or auto pay activities where you can sign up for a recurring draw from your bank account. And that those functions or commodities would transition as well. So this slide here is not to prejudge all of the details, but it is to say that there's a commonality across all the working discussions, that these are the basic areas that would be retained in the HIX portal, and these are the items that would be evaluated and transferred. So starting on the fifth slide is, what I tried to do in the next couple slides is identify where there are areas of agreement or consensus across the carrier community and exchange in Xerox. And there are areas where there are varying feedback. Varying doesn't mean good or bad. It just means different. And then last is a set of considerations that tie to what is a request for some additional due diligence over the next week or so. So common across the carriers, and I think it's important to reiterate to a carrier feedback, is that these considerations on this slide have to happen no matter what. So operations transition as exactly outlined in the prior slide, they transition differently, or they do not transition at all. So this is where the carriers are making a very clear statement that these things need to happen as part of that transition. Complete data reconciliation. I've had the opportunity to work on some of the very specific reconciliation of EDI 820s and automated clearinghouse transfers and EDI 834. That those activities would, of course, need to be completed and tied out before a transition of that activity to a carrier. But we need to implement delinquency processing. We have some past milestones, some milestones coming up in terms of the regulatory grace period in which we would evaluate some sort of delinquency proceeding, as well as to implement a standard process. And then last but not least, the terms were 100% accountability or full control, but in essence that the HIX portal would retain accountability for the accurate determination of eligibility and enrollment information, as well as plan selection and QLEs, or qualifying life events, as I mentioned on the earlier slide. The next slide, 6, is again areas of varying feedback, neither good nor bad, just different. The first one here is the necessary infrastructure, and I believe we heard some public comment from the co-op representative this morning that there are some carriers who have more mature operational procedures around the payment transition. There are some that do not have an infrastructure at all. And then there are organizations where we receive feedback that there are varying degrees of either reconfiguration or acquisition where some billing activity may be able to occur, but it's in a different construct, such as group billing versus individual billing. And the second one here is the limited conversation we had on the financials, which is that there's a view that the operations costs vary. There's feedback that some of them will likely be the same. The example that was used in one of the interactions is a stamp is a stamp is a stamp. So there are certain amounts where maybe there's a maturity of processing or a volume consideration to achieve postal discounts. But in essence, mailing out a piece of paper costs within the same framework, regardless of the amount of the premium. At the same time, there's an evaluation, and I put this example here, and I want to be clear that this is not an advocacy in one way, shape, or form in terms of the funding structures, but using the data that was in the exchange staff's analysis on the March 27th about the difference in PMPM calculation in the Xerox Exchange contract. If you apply that PMPM against average premiums, that the amount of that relative to the premium is significantly different between the medical carriers and the dental carriers. And the dental carriers were very clear that that's a consideration that needs to be addressed. The additional due diligence on slide 7. These are 3 specific areas where I don't believe, certainly from a Xerox perspective, and I've heard the same thing from the exchange and the carriers, that this is a lengthy evaluation, but there's some specifics that would drive milestone dates and approach and the types of resources necessary to affect the transition. The first are information technology and business operations. These 3 items here are in a little bit more detail, but in essence, these are mechanics. Again, we're not reinventing the wheel. At the same time, these considerations here are as we are changing the wheel while the car is in motion. So there are just some detailed considerations about how to get from this model to a different model. The second is the rollout strategy. There's conversation very clearly in the board request for the potential for a pilot as soon as May of this year, so a couple weeks away. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but we didn't have any hands raised in the carrier community to be that pilot. But I certainly don't want to put words in the mouth of any carriers. I haven't read all the public comment. Or a staggered implementation, or what I referenced earlier was a big bang implementation. And again, not to prejudge, but I think some of the considerations were that a big bang helps mitigate some of the risks around the IT and business operations, such as the split of a consumer. If a consumer has St. Mary's Medical, Anthem Medical, and Delta Dental, that operating with one or two of those carriers transitioned and one not could be a complicated arrangement that would need a little bit more planning. And last but certainly not least, I defer much of the detail around the rate structures, but I know that the conversation from an earlier agenda item was that the topic of rates would need to include some discussion between the exchange and carriers around what could be done in 2014, where the rates do assume Xerox operations, or 2015, which are still, I believe, subject to further conversation and certification. So from a next steps, I think I've hit a number of these here, but the Xerox and the exchange, as well as carriers, not to preclude, just need to reach out and confirm those lessons learned from other successful operations that do what I would characterize as the individual or split billing. The exchange and the carriers need to have some conversation, I think, regarding the rate structures. And then across all the parties, some working sessions that I don't, again, believe will be lengthy, but to make sure we've done our due diligence to identify any risk areas and then put the appropriate resources around them. And then I do anticipate by the next board meeting, and by say next board meeting, I'm assuming it's a bi-weekly, but to be determined, that we would be in position to, following these activities, come back with a milestone plan and some anticipated resources and other risks and considerations for the board's review and comment. So that's the summary of where we sit today.
Thank you, Mr. Green. You did well for your first time. Do we have any questions from board members, or Greg or Kristen, do you want to add anything to his report?
No, Ms. Campbell, we don't have anything additional. Again, we stand ready to work with the exchange and the carriers to keep moving.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll open it up for questions or comments from the board members.
Madam Chair, this is Leslie Johnstone.
Yes, Ms. Johnstone.
In the report that comes to the board, would it be a full vetting of each of these rollout strategies or just the recommended one?
This, for the record, this is Dan Green. I would anticipate that it would be a discussion of the options in goods and bads, and then a recommendation. I hesitate to say necessarily a consensus recommendation, but it would be dutiful in presenting that if different carriers have different considerations. But yes, we would provide a walkthrough of the discussion and the analysis that got us to a recommendation.
Florence Jameson. I was just curious, is it possible once you start getting your reports after this is implemented and we see those people that are late on payment, don't make payments, are terminated, or those who electively choose for other reasons, they have other options that are different or better or available to them, and they leave an exchange product, is it going to be possible that the board can be reported those numbers monthly so we get a feel for the attrition rate on our program? And also, if it is possible, as many businesses do, getting patients, customer satisfaction, to find out what was the reason that they left. And again, I may be too much detail, but certainly at least the attrition rate. What is the length of time if a patient is late on their payment that they will be terminated automatically? And is it the same for our products with the Blue Cross Blue Shield on the exchange as it is for the products that are not on the exchange for Blue Cross Blue Shield, et cetera?
Well, for the record, this is Dan. I can speak to the first piece, which is the delinquency rules established under the exchange are for a consumer who does not have APTC associated with their case is 30 days. And for a consumer who does have APTC associated with their elections, it's 90 days. I'm not familiar enough with the provisions off the exchange to comment. Regarding the attrition rates, I think that's an excellent suggestion. That'll be a combination of data that would be available in the HIX portal and data that would be available from the carriers, but I think it certainly makes sense. I did hear comments through the working sessions about incentives or disincentives, and so I think it would be good to be able to evaluate that. And we'll certainly bring that up in the working sessions.
Madam Chair, Scott Kipper from the Division of Insurance. And the issue you touched on with the termination of an individual if they don't pay, it is correct. Under federal law, you have 90 days. State law is considerably shorter than that, and that does apply outside the exchange. Inside the exchange, you have an additional period of time according to federal law. However, the consumer or the provider is in jeopardy because they may not get paid if that individual doesn't pay their premium. Those claims in the last 60 days are pended, and they may not be paid if that consumer does not pay their premium.
Thank you, Commissioner Kipper. Any other questions? Comments? Not hearing any. All right, I know we're all anxious to hear how the workshops work out, and we have not set an agenda yet for other than the special meeting next Thursday or sometime next week, but we'll keep you plan that it's probably going to be in a couple of weeks. All right, if there aren't any other questions on that, that moves us to...
Madam Chairman?
Yes, Dr. Jameson.
Is it appropriate to, while we're talking about insurance, while we're talking about the billing, is this, we had a question out to them about some of the patients who had enrolled and the payments not made and the confusion of tying the payments to the patient. Would, that issue? Did we ever get any feedback on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure that that particular question is an agenda item, but I think Xerox.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was part of billing, so I will just withdraw the question.
Okay, but I'm sure Xerox heard the question, so we might get back with an answer. All right, any other questions or comments on this agenda item?
Madam Chair, this is Leslie Johnstone.
Yes.
I'll weave this into this item. I'd also like to find out, maybe have it incorporated into the thinking, the individual billing, the status of the electronic interface for the eligibility and enrollment to the carriers. Is that part working before we talk about the individual billing? So that can be incorporated into the pros and cons or the status of consideration of each option.
So that is a request on something to come back to us, Ms. Johnstone. Is that correct?
Unless they can answer things working.
Okay.
Ms. Johnstone, this is Greg Padiello. We'll make sure that we add that to the report.
Any other questions or comments? All right, let's move on to agenda item number 12, which is possible action for other dates and times and agenda items. I think we know that we're going to have a meeting sometime next week that will be properly noticed, dealing with the Bob Kerr report on the BOSS audit. We'll schedule that after we make contact or staff makes contact with board members to see if there's a time that works better than others.
Madam Chair, this is Damon Haycock for the record. I just want to bring to the attention of the board that the per member per month fee adoption hearing will need to be properly noticed 15 days prior to the date that fee is approved, and that through current regulation that fee has to be approved no later than April 30th unless the board chooses to change that regulation and then re-announce that hearing to change the regulation to push it past April.
Madam Chair, if the board has been using NRS Chapter 233B as a guidepost, under this statute, it's not required to comply with the provisions of 233B if it chooses not to. And I think the decision was made that in circumstances where there's a time limit that the board would exercise that discretion to not follow 233B notice requirements. Thanks.
So if I can restate that, we're only required to have a 3-day noticing as with any open meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So I think that gives staff and Division of Insurance a sufficient time that they don't feel like they're being driven specifically by a date that we might pick today. So I know everybody's cognizant of it. So we would have to be properly noticed by what date? If we chose the 30th, which is the drop dead date, we'd have to be noticed the Friday before? Okay. So at least that kind of gives people guidelines on it. Are there any other items that the board would like to see posted as agenda items for discussion? Okay, if I'm hearing none, then we'll move to public comment. And before we do that, again, I want to at least state for the record that we had 4 public comments that were written and submitted to the board. 2 of them were from the Nevada Association of Health Plans, one dealing with the fees and one with the billing process. We also had one from Delta Dental and the other from Nevada Dental Benefits Limited. And those are all posted on our website so individuals can review those. So we'll open it up for public comment. Is there anyone here in Carson City? I'm not seeing anyone. How about there in Henderson?
No, Madam Chair.
All right. Before we adjourn, I do want to thank staff again. I know we've had you through grueling schedules lately, and it looks like we'll continue to do so for a while. But I really appreciate all of your hard work and all the help that you offer to us. So thank you again on behalf of the board. With that, we'll go ahead and adjourn and watch for a public notice on that meeting for next week to go over the audit report.
Thank you.